Hello, everyone. Welcome to our amazing webinar based on procurement, benchmarks, and best practices. Today, the goal is to really discuss effective negotiation tactics, vendor scorecards, contract consolidation, cost transparency, really anything to help you walk away with getting an understanding of all the different tactics that you can utilize within procurement that's going to set yourself up and your organization up for best practices. So really excited about the discussion today. It's going to be very beneficial for everyone on the webinar today, and then anyone that's going to be listening after the fact. So we're pumped about that. My name is Billy Stowe, CRO and co-founder here at Lava Technology Services. I am the La, so being from Louisiana, we decided to just to have a fun go at the name with Jake being from Purcellville, Virginia, and being the VA, which is also our headquarters here in Purcellville. Joining me today, I have Julie Vick, VP of Supply Chain and Program Management at Adventus Healthcare, and as well as Kent Wistman, VP of Procurement at Server Farm. So I definitely want to welcome both of you guys here today. Before we kind of jump right in and get right to it, Julie, maybe if you want to, do a quick introduction and let everybody kind of know your background, what do you do, how you do it. We'll do the same with Kent, and then we'll jump right into some questions that I'm really looking forward to moderate today with you guys about.
Thank you, Billy. My name is Julie Vick. I serve as the Vice President for Supply Chain and Program Management at Adventus Healthcare. I've been here for the past 13 years in various roles from IT procurement, technology implementation, supply chain, and other various construction roles where telecom is implemented throughout the entire organization.
That's awesome.
So I'm Kent Wistman, so I'm the VP of Procurement at Server Farm. So I've been at Server Farm about 1.5 years. Prior to that, 19 years at AMD, managing pretty much all indirect procurement from basically 2005 forward. So lots of experience in the tech industry across my career span. So nice to meet you all.
That's awesome, man. And between technology and healthcare, we have a really good mix of different backgrounds, different ideas, but a lot of it stems, within procurement. A lot of the things hold true within healthcare, within technology, within finance. So kind of getting right into it, I am one of our first questions we wanted to kind of really put out to you guys is, how does procurement typically proactively position yourselves as like a strategic partner to IT and get that early involvement with IT and the project, so that you're not either left behind, or you kind of can truly understand the scope of the project, and you're kind of in it with those leaders on the IT side. Maybe Julie, if you can kick us off with how are you guys positioning yourselves to be that strategic leader for sure?
Sure. So it's absolutely critical that procurement play this role. We manage the majority of, if you're part of a group purchasing organization, or if you have the VAR relationships, it's always best to understand the full scope and really get involved day one and understand not only just the capital or the maybe implementation component of it, but understanding total cost, understanding the requirements for implementation, also understanding a vendor's end of quarter, end of year, or any additional rebates or different things that can be applied based upon what you're trying to procure, will be very beneficial in those overarching negotiations. So if you're trying to maybe procure a hardware set or a software set, understanding which vendors have the best total cost, or looking at the total cost of everything and understanding where you have buying capabilities is always going to help the technology teams into their timeline, as well as a procurement timeline and timetable for the actual purchase.
Oh, that's awesome. Kent, what similar thoughts or different?
Yeah, I definitely have some thoughts here. So a lot of IT organizations are extremely technical, and some they don't really think they need procurement's help. So you have to have a breakthrough, and the primary way to do that is to find the right stakeholder client that you can work with and get a win, and then you've got to work yourself up. Like realistically, somebody from procurement should be in the IT staff meetings on a weekly, regular basis, because they're always talking and things come up, and they may not be planned as part of capital or whatever, but you get a security breach, something is going to happen. And if you're not at the table, you're going to be doing the contract on the weekend for whatever, patch or whatever is immediately needed. So it's really important. You don't have to be the most technical person, but you need to have enough understanding to at least understand the lingo or have the right kind of friendship with someone that says, "Hey, we were talking about this. What does that mean?" Because they do want someone in, with that seat at the table that has enough understanding that they're not just going to go take whatever you give them and just blatantly throw it out there and hope for the best and not know what they're looking at when it comes back. It's important to understand. And like Julie said, software with software implementation, ongoing support, those are huge models that take a lot of effort, and the IT team will have the technical expertise on what they want, but you also have to have that stakeholder end user perspective, because the IT guys are great at saying this is what it should do, but it may not be what your end client needs. And so that whole view is very important. In my past life, we would actually get contacted by non-IT people about software.
Mhm.
And the first thing we would do is ask them, who's your IT business partner? We need to map this out, understand your requirements and what you want before we go spend money and implement something that you're probably not going to like in the end if you don't do the work up front.
I
It's
agree. Those
important
workflows are
to be at that
important.
table. And
Yeah,
it's a
those
three-legged
workflows
stool,
are
right?
critical.
It's procurement, it's IT, and your stakeholder.
Mhm. Yeah. Understanding what that workflow is, I think, is the most critical component of it. Also, I've always found that a piece of technology normally has tentacles into something else. So if you update a switch, do you have to upgrade your fiber? If you upgrade, your servers, do you need to, is there another piece that has to be also upgraded, implemented as part of it? So there might be a predecessor to even taking this upgrade, or that also needs to be included into the project that no one thought about before, that can add cost.
And that actually brings up a great point. When challenges do arise, like what you guys are talking about is our utopia that we are aligned with IT and all of their strategic initiatives, and we're going hand to hand and all these things. And but inevitably that doesn't happen all the time, right? So there's going to be some issues, and when kind of issues arise with some of those projects because they're working independently from y'all, how do y'all like delicately balance the respect for IT? Because obviously we need to do that, but with also like kind of safeguarding the business requirements and that making sure, especially even from because you're doing a dual role there, Julie, with not only owning the procurement but also PMO and ensuring that the project isn't going off the rails and that things are you're trying to button everything up, if you will. But how do we kind of navigate that world, if you will?
A lot of it has to do with project contingencies, and a good risk management plan. So it happens often. There's a surprise requirement that no one knew about, thought about, or something that's come up that's like tentacled into the implementation that you didn't know about. So a lot of it does really come down to those workflows and understanding, or at least attempting to understand what those requirements are and how we get to this solution and what the gaps are going to be, and then managing through it. I mean, sometimes projects have to stop, they have to be rescoped, they have to, we incur additional costs. Sometimes we go back to the vendor if it's something that they didn't disclose, then that's a different conversation versus something that was overlooked, at the time of implementation. Sometimes it's budget contingency, just putting in that additional 5% or 10% into, depending on how large your project is, to know that you're going to run into some unknowns, and how you navigate yourself through those is definitely speaks to the partnership that you have not only with the IT team doing the implementation, but also with the business owner and their request.
Yeah, similar with some of the things you found, Kent, working in
I,
now and before as well.
very, very, very similar. So, I mean, the more work you put in up front in defining your requirements, mapping your process flows out, like from a business perspective, the better off you're going to be. If you rely on the software provider to tell you, they will all tell you, it does this, it's built in, it's great, we've got all the workflows you need. Guess what? They don't. They might be hard coded and then somebody leaves and it breaks. Those don't work. You've got to put in a lot of effort up front, and especially in right sizing what you buy. It is very easy to overbuy, subscribe to like cloud-based services that could be transaction-based or revenue-based or people-based. And you once you sign those cloud agreements, you don't downsize. They are locked in for 3 to 5 years. You are stuck. So right sizing is really critical, and that's where sometimes you need the help of a third party that is familiar, especially if you're doing a complicated purchase like a large scale ERP like an SAP or an Oracle or Salesforce. Those programs have so many little bits and pieces and plugins and add-ons that you can spiral totally out of control, especially if you get one of these gung-ho IT guys that wants everything under the sun. You're going to spend money for a bunch of stuff you may never use. We call it shelfware. You don't want to have shelfware. You want to right size and then have pricing built into your contractual documentation that says, hey, if I need another 100 users, I know what the cost is. You're not going to list price. You're going to extend your existing discount or step up to another tier with a lower price. Those things are really important on large projects. Otherwise, you can end up in the end spending so much money and people not being happy with the outputs.
Yeah. I'm curious from you mentioned the third party folks, we've seen everything from, the Gartners and the Foresters to third parties like even like a Lava who does a lot of third party consulting. And we can kind of look at the market of a lot of things that we do as a service. How do you, because procurement does a really good job of negotiating and knows a lot of different things. How do you guys determine when it is the right fit to bring in a third party? Whether it's procurement bringing them in, IT bringing them in, finance bringing them in. How do you guys typically, work that angle to know when is the right time to bring in someone from the outside to help with whether it's a project like you mentioned, SAP or whomever, or a different type of project? What, maybe Julie, if you want to expand upon that as far as when and where you have seen the need and the desire to have a third party versus doing everything internally.
So I think it really has to do with what skill sets you have internally. So if you're going to, as Kent mentioned, like a brand new ERP, when we implemented Workday, we had third-party support. And it was the fact that it was a brand new ERP. We were coming from a very old version of PeopleSoft, and we wanted to make sure that we leveraged best practices, that we designed our workflows in a way that was not PeopleSoft's best practice, but Workday's best practice. So it's definitely in a place, I think, where you don't necessarily have the in-house knowledge, and you're going into a total brand new environment. We've seen that with Cerner, with Epic, with your big EMR companies. People specialize in being able to navigate their speak, and being able to kind of guide customers through those pitfalls of not purchasing the things that are never going to get implemented, not purchasing the things that are still vaporware to the vendor. And so you help yourself in, yes, it's going to cost you a little bit more upfront in having that partner, but it's going to benefit you in the long run where you are building to best practice. Because sometimes things are too customizable. I think also, third-party partners that have a specialty in Microsoft licensing, or which is a jumbled mess all in itself. And if anybody who's done Microsoft licensing knows that that's a fact, having a partner who is an expert, not just a VAR, but also an expert in how to negotiate and how to get the best bang for your buck can only help an organization as they navigate through it. Now, if your job every day, all day is to be that Microsoft license specialist, you don't necessarily need that. But if you only do an agreement every 3 years, then that's not going to be your subject matter expertise. So I think it really depends on what you have in-house from an expertise perspective, and knowing where to go to get that supplemental support that is only going to benefit you in the long run.
Yeah, and we've seen that a lot. We at Lava sometimes tell clients, if you're looking at a new UCAS system, let's say, and you've been on-prem with Cisco or Avaya for 20 years, this might be your first time in your career that you're moving from an on-prem phone system to a UC as a service type system. And we've done it 20 times this year. So we had that institutional knowledge of being able to help you guys make that decision a lot faster, right? And I think that's where a lot of times procurement loves working with those kind of third parties, because to your point, they negotiate with Microsoft every 3 years, and things change. Microsoft changes the way they do things. They change the way how they bundle things, and it's like, okay, now let's try to peel back the onion of what we actually really need, and make sure that my SAPs and my Oracles and my SQL databases and the ERPs and the EMRs, it's not something you're dealing with every day kind of thing. It's once every 3 years, once every 5 years. So, to your point, you kind of need to pick and choose when and where you want to have that. One thing you actually mentioned very early on, Kent, was you don't have to be like a subject matter expert in a lot of things as procurement, but I am curious, simply because I've known you for quite a while, and the conversations I've had with Julie, way more technical than the typical person that we see inside of procurement. So I am curious, how do you balance, not needing to be the the so-called knowledge expert in a lot of different areas, but also kind of hold your ground when you're in those IT strategy meetings, and you can talk the talk as well. Like, can you maybe give us a good semblance of how technical you think procurement needs to be in a lot of these roles?
Sure. I mean, you're not going to, you may not know the exact ins and outs of what a software or a server does, but so let's talk about servers, for instance. You need to understand like the basic like structure of a server. Like there's the microprocessor sizing, there's RAM, hard drives. The basic things will get you across that line. How many RAID and what RAID configuration, let the IT guys figure that out. But the key components that make up the cost model for something like a server, like if you're putting 2 terabytes of memory of DDR5 or 6 in a server, that's going to be half the cost of your box, right? So understanding those kind of basic things that as a procurement category manager, you should be like really understanding, like if I'm in charge of servers as a category manager, I should understand like CPU pricing, GPU pricing, how those things drive the overall cost models. You don't know the difference in DDR5 and 6 other than there's a cost delta or whatever. But you have to have some level of understanding. And I mean, and there's no reason that, I've always said, I can teach someone how to do procurement if they're really interested. Like I could take an IT person and make them a procurement person. It's a lot harder to go the other way. If you want to go from a procurement person to become an IT person and be in the weeds, software development, probably not a good fit unless you have a different, a specific background skill set in code or whatever. But you will learn, I mean, because new technologies come about, the IT guys are learning, and that's where being at the table early, like if you're at the table at the day they say, we want to go do this, you're in that same boat potentially with the IT team, learning that new technology, getting whatever level of understanding you need, and everybody's asking the right questions to learn, versus you're not at the table. They come to you with this new whiz bang box they want to buy, and you're like, this is a unicorn. It's going to cost $60,000 per server. where'd you come up with this? Like, oh, well, we've been talking for 6 months about it. Like, if you were involved in that 6 month period, you would have a much better understanding of what and why and the reasoning maybe behind some of these specific things. So it's a skill you can learn if you just have to pay attention. I think be willing to learn. Google is your best friend. And, you hear something, you can Google it and it'll tell you what it is and give you more information than you might need. But at least you can talk intelligently and understand, what they're doing and why.
I think it also helps to, when you get a quote, like say you're not brought in until later in the process and somebody just kind of flings a quote out at you and says, all I need is $50,000 and I can buy blah, 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 blah. And you can take a look at it and go, wait a minute, this is only 1/4 of what you say it is. They're missing all these different things. There's hidden costs in here. Are you going to pay subscription fees for all these other things and just this one capital component? And, having those conversations with them and making sure that the person who's requesting fully understands what they're buying, because it might be to the fact that what is being quoted is only, a portion of what is actually needed in order to make the solution whole. And so somebody thinks that they got this grand deal, but they really are just only buying 25% of what they need instead of the whole, oh, if you think you're getting something that's, go back to the server, that's state of the art, these new blades, these new whatever, well, where's the chassis? Do you have the chassis or are you just buying the blades? Or whatever it may be. And people don't, if they aren't at least somewhat savvy in what they're looking at, they're going to miss this stuff. And you're going to have either a chassis that's empty or a bunch of line cards with nowhere to go, just based upon the environment. And I see it happen all the time. So those kinds of things, you, like you said, you don't have to be the technical expert in the room. And I know for a fact I never, ever am. But at least have enough understanding of what's being bought, what additional software might need to go with that, or what other pieces and parts need to go along with buying that piece of technology in order to understand the full cost. Because that's what every CFO wants to understand, is what is the total cost, not just this one piece or, a piece over here, but how much am I spending this year, next year, for 5 years, as we look at this, because it's not just the implementation, there's also the depreciation, if there's ongoing subscription fees, maintenance costs, whatever it may be. We want to see the whole thing, not just, the $50 you need today, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that leads into, one of the topics we discussed before of the total cost and how is that calculated, right? And where does that go when you're presenting something up to the board or up to the CFO, up to the CIO, whomever the final decision maker is? What I'm assuming they're that they're going to be asking for that. How do you guys typically present that within procurement along with IT? Is it simply a spreadsheet? Is it a presentation? Is it like, how are you typically, getting all that data as well? Like, and actually that it's kind of two parts. How are you getting the data? How are you delivering the data? But then how are you collectively making sure you know what to get the data from, right? From meaning from, if I'm looking at Cisco, I need to know what's my SmartNet cost going to be for the next 3 years, and then maybe what that fourth and fifth year are going to be. Like, are you guys proactively getting that information, and how are you presenting that up to the executives?
So so you have to work in conjunction with your IT, partner, because they're going to have like a pretty good understanding of the components. That's and the bits and pieces that are in there, but that's where the procurement team then takes that and says, okay, there's an ongoing maintenance and or software licensing cost here. Like, I'll pick on Palo Alto. Palo Alto has great products, but their software licensing on a year-over-year basis is 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 unbelievably high compared to what you would have traditionally seen, 5, 10 years ago, where it was maybe 18%. It's way higher than that. But that's a cost you have to factor in. Do you need third-party support outside of that, do you need additional training for your internal teams? You have to build as much of it as you can into a model. And there may be some things you have to just estimate, but you should have like, here's my capital cost, right? Capital cost, say it's $5 million. But then over the next 5 years, and that's probably your refresh cycle on something like a network switch or something like that. Here, it's a 5-year life expectancy. Year one, I'm going to have, my initial cash outlay, but then, I depreciate that, say, over 5 years. Some of them want the cash flow over the 5-year term. So bringing in your finance partner from the IT team is really helpful. I mean, at my prior company, they wanted a cash projection, like how does this lay out in my capital depreciation over X number of years, because different, a server might be 3 years or it could be 6 years, depending on where it's going to be allocated to in the system, right? Versus like, some types of larger pieces of equipment could be 10 years. They could be the life of the building lease. So having that as much as you can, and you have to know the type of people you're reporting this data out to. If you've got a CTO, CFO that is going to want to get in the weeds, you still have to, the other guys want, hey, I want a 1-page summary. Tell me what it's going to cost me, quick and dirty. But your CFO's like, I want to see the details. Like, what's my quarterly outlay over the next 5 years? You've got to have different levels of detail, but it all has to tie together. And, ideally you've got your 1-page kind of executive summary. It says what you want, how much it's going to cost, and the impact if you don't do it, right? And then you have your follow on, like, hey, you want to dive into the finances? You've got a detailed slide that shows the financials over whatever period of time that's been vetted, right, with your finance team, partner, whoever, because they're the ones that are going to say that's right or wrong. And the last thing you want is somebody saying, I don't agree with that. When you're presenting at that level, everybody has to be aligned, from your CFO, your CTO, all of those people should be pre-aligned before you present to a CEO or a board for something large. Everybody's got to be on board and agreed. And those, like a 3-page slide deck could have 100 hours of work in it for a 5-minute presentation. So it
I
takes a
agree.
lot of effort, and making sure you have a clear and concise message. Don't get in there and just wander around, right? And be prepared for the executive to say, you know what, I read the entire deck that you sent me as a pre-read. Most of them want pre-reads a day or two or a weekend early. They will have read it and digested it, and they've already got their questions. So I've seen more than once that they say, stop talking. I just want to have a discussion here. I have a few questions. I read it. I understand it. Answer my questions and we'll get through this. So you're potentially, your elevator speech for your slide deck could go completely off the rails, but you need to know your material and know that, like, if it's a finance question, say, hey, finance person, can you speak to that? If you're not comfortable, it's a tough place to be when you're talking to some of these top level executives, because they understand the business. They just want to understand, like, why, who, what, when, and where, and what if I don't do this? What happens sometimes?
We get asked a lot for return on investment, which is very hard for people to put together. And so there's a lot of assumptions, I think, that are made in ROI calculations. And so that's where your partnership with finance, your partnership with your stakeholders as well. Because if you're doing maybe a software implementation and it's going to save time, save money, save on resources, whatever that may be, if you're going to make those statements, they have to be backed up with numbers. And so that's, I think, one of the hardest parts in understanding, okay, if you're going to say, this is going to save us, 7 man-hours a day, let's see it in numbers, especially for a CFO, because that's That's what they got to understand is, if I'm going to make this investment, where am I going to see it? There are some things that are just sunk costs. You don't have a choice. You have to do it. It doesn't matter. It's a regulatory requirement. It's not a risk you want to take. Those things, and they're actually a lot easier than the ones where we are saying that we're going to increase our level of reimbursement from the state. You are going to see some sort of, whether it's faster to market or less time in the queue or whatever, in tying those metrics to it. That's the harder part in trying to pull together your ROI, because after it's implemented, they want to see those results as well. And sometimes they're a little iffy.
Well, I've actually seen where they said, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to now scale our organization based on what you told me. You said this will cut my resource requirement by 50%. So they reallocate 50% of the people to other activities. And now you're left with what somebody said this would do. And you have a lot of unhappy people because, they never take the software vendor's word for their amount of efficiency improvement or gains, or savings, whatever. Never ever take that. That stuff is so propped up. It is unbelievable. You have to do your own work to figure out, like a good example is the cloud, right? Oh yeah, it's $20, for a server per hour, whatever. That sounds cheap until you actually do it and found out that $20 an hour plus every data in, every data out. Oh my goodness, all this cold storage for all my backup, you're spending significantly more. And it is not a simple one to calculate. It takes a lot of effort to compare an on-prem to a cloud model. Because you have to estimate your services, your storage, your refresh costs, your capital depreciation, all that. But you'd be surprised if you really did the work. The numbers are astonishing sometimes.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into, with needing to bring an ROI and show results and keep track of things. How is procurement graded? Like how are you judged and measured in all these things? What is that for not only you, but then how you kind of measure your team success as well? Not only working with IT, but all the things that you guys do within procurement. Because I know, like, Julie, we were talking, and you wear a hard hat 2 days out of the week because your role is expanded and there's a lot more to do. And Kent, just by way of, you have to be wearing a hard hat simply because you go into data centers all day. But like, how are you guys measured, and what does success look like to the typical procurement officer, advisor, and kind of all in between, if you will?
So, everybody always goes to how much money did you save me? And that's never going to go away. There are hundreds of softer metrics that people have come up with. The challenge with them is they're soft, and your CFO doesn't care that you did some kind of soft, fluffy little metric. He's going to care about the savings. But like, I guess, from my perspective, I'm buying large chunks of equipment for data centers, right, to build them. For me right now, it's cost, delivery schedules, and quality, and then the service and support that we get all have to work. If somebody slips their delivery 2 to 3 weeks, that can destroy an entire, schedule. So having, liquidated damages or SLAs in your contract is super important, with the understanding that that is never going to cover your cost that you incur if they're actually late. It's great to have, it puts some teeth in the contract, but it's never going to make up for the cost of a hyperscaler saying you are 3 weeks late and it's 100 plus thousands of dollars a day you're late on your delivery. That one guy that delivered his piece of switchgear 3 weeks late, he might pay you 100 grand. it's not covering that schedule slip, the relationship with that end customer. So those things have to be really, really understood. Like your relationships with your people that buy your product or you're serving are those should be metrics that you measure somehow. They're hard to measure, but the satisfaction of like, does the IT team see me as a strategic partner? Do they ask me questions as a procurement partner, right? Or do they see you as a transactional partner? If that's the case, you've got significant work to do to put yourself in the right position, because it's not always about the dollars you save. It's about the contractual obligations, the delivery models that they're going to provide, the sustainability of this. There's so many things that get thrown at the procurement teams now. It's not just price and delivery. It's, well, do they have a minority certification? I've got to meet certain metrics. I need to buy from diversity providers. There's all kinds of things that you can track, in my opinion. So I don't know, Julie probably has some similar thoughts. There's a lot out there.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot out there. I mean, we always get our cost savings. We're part of a GPO. So from that perspective, we're really looking at our share back, we're looking at our rebates, we're looking at our cost savings opportunities. Any place where we can leverage a larger contract, change our tier structure, those kinds of things obviously are definitely places that we are judged. But I think it's really the partnership. So it's not just our partnership with IT, but it's also our partnership with our business stakeholders, and making sure that we understand what you're asking for, that those workflows are documented, that those things are there, that they see the value from the investment that they've made, whether it's their time, their resources, their cash, their whatever it may be, and really having that partnership across the organization, and then being able to stretch and flex when the going gets tough. So from side on the hospital perspective, when your data center floods, when your on-prem space floods, where are your connections with your VARs to be able to turn equipment around? Where are your connections with the carriers when something happens and you lose a leg of your network because a car wraps itself around a pole and your lines happen to be in that mess? So those kinds of situations where it's not just your internal customers, but it's also those relationships with stakeholders, with your VARs, with your really the contracts, like the biggest contracts that you have, and understanding how you can rely on those partnerships to turn something around. So in my role, I have the medical supply side as well. And so being able to figure out who else is in the marketplace, get a substitute in, and being able to turn it around as quickly as possible is definitely another place where, from a procurement perspective, we're often, sitting in the hot seat trying to help everybody, figure their way out of whatever global crisis there is at this point in time. And that's, I think, probably where I get the most is trying to, band-aid those solutions when you find yourself in a predicament where something's late, something gets delayed, you're not able to get a product, whether it's technology or not, and leveraging those strategic relationships with other vendors to be able to come up with a backup plan.
And I mean, Julie, we've heard a lot over the last little bit about the strategic partnership within IT and making sure you guys are more of a trusted advisor to IT and not just, the cost controller and the person who's just trying to come in and, muck up a deal and last minute, chopping things in half and yada yada. I mean, you guys have said a couple of them, but can you lay out, and Kent, I'd love your opinion on this too. Like, what are some of the tried and true, like, relationship building tactics, if you will, that procurement can utilize to make sure that you're in the same room with IT, you get those strategic partnerships with finance, Like, what are, I know Kent mentioned, being in the, whether they have steering committees and in some of these meetings. How do you guys build those kind of ongoing relationships to make sure that you are always thought of as part of the process?
So I take a very hands-on approach, and sometimes I think it's to my detriment, but I actually, look at where can I, not just sitting on the councils or whatnot, but if somebody does bring me a project, I try to, get out in the field, meet the people who are actually using the solution, the tool, want to change, do whatever, to try to really understand their requirements. I think that it's building those relationships with people and understanding their workflow, seeing them as the subject matter expert that they are, and really showing them how you can help. Not take over, not tell them, oh, you need to buy this instead of that, but how can I be your partner? How can I help you through this? So, like, perfect example from a construction perspective is, like I said, we're part of a GPO. So I'm not going to tell somebody, oh, you need to go use this vendor. But if you do use this vendor, here are the savings that we could get. Here are the other things that could happen with this. Here's the relationships that's already there. And so understanding and building those relationships from a partnering perspective, or sometimes you already know the vendor and you already have a relationship and you can get those discounts, or you can get more clarifying information that maybe the customer hasn't been able to get to. And so just trying to be their advocate and their partner instead of, just, oh, well, we have to go to procurement. It's really coming to us as somebody that can help you build your business case, understand your workflow, and help you negotiate, and really has the best interest at heart.
Awesome. Yeah, Kent, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, the best procurement people have really strong people skills. If you don't have people skills, probably should find another profession. Maybe you should go work in IT. I don't know. But procurement people have to have people skills because sometimes you have to pull information out of your client, your friend that you're working with in IT, whoever. They don't want to give you, they're like, oh, I'm going to keep this close. This is my project. You're there to support them. I mean, procurement always should be seen as a support organization in most companies. It's not like, it's not a P&L. It could be a P&L, but it's typically not a profit, organization. But you have to have strong relationships, and building those relationships might be just through, learning, sitting down, having regular scheduled meetings with the key players within IT, having one-on-ones with the people that do infrastructure versus the software teams, just meeting people and understanding that way they see you. Oh, hey, yeah, I got something coming up. Let's get some time and talk about it. So you can get in front of, the need. Because if you don't, you're transactional, and that's not a true procurement role. That's a buyer. If you want to be a buyer, that's great. But if you really want to be a strategic sourcing professional, you have to have, you need to understand your category or commodity. You need to do research. You need to know who the players are, what's up and coming technologies, things like that. So you can speak somewhat intelligently when they go, hey, we want to go do this. And you're like, hey, I was looking at Gartner's report, and that provider is not looked at well, but here, let me get you the data, and you can see who the top providers are in that space, et cetera. You have to bring something to the table, right? You can't just be, okay, I'll take your requirements, run an RFP, pound through a contract, and issue a PO. You really need to bring more than that to the table, and that's where the relationship is super important.
Yeah, I agree, Kent. And you kind of mentioned as far as kind of knowing the changing landscape of IT, and IT is always evolving, right? It's probably the fastest growing group within any sort of, because everybody relies on IT. And you guys not only have to worry about what IT is doing, what our customers are doing, what our customers are needing, but like the IT landscape is just ever evolving, right? How are you guys understanding, with the new AI craze and all these new software, SaaS applications that are coming out there, and all these alternative software platforms that people are starting to use now? how do y'all stay ahead of the curve with IT, but also helping them mitigate risks at the same time? What are you seeing out there, Kent?
I mean, part of it is you need to understand your category, right? And as part of that, it means you may need to sign up for subscription services. Like for data centers, I've got 3 or 4 major data center conference type things, and they send out like daily updates on what's going on in the industry. Sign up for, if you do consulting services, sign up for consulting benchmark data and read it. So you know what's going on in your space. And then if something piques your interest, dig deeper. I mean, there's so much information available, that you don't have to go buy a subscription for, but just getting data feeds on your category or area of expertise that you need to know about is helpful. Knowing what's going on in the data center space is super helpful for me, knowing like what are the trends in cooling technologies versus switchgear, things like that. I need to know that, and I get all these feeds. Sometimes I don't read them because I'm too busy, but I know I can always go click on the website and read more than my fullest content about what's going on in the market. And then if I see something, talk to your strategic supplier that says, hey, I saw an article about blah. Where are you guys at on this technology? What do you think? How's it? And they're more than happy to talk as long as it's, stuff they can speak to. So, I mean, it's just important to do some research, understand your space that you're working in. If you're looking at software, research ERP systems, research, and you'll get more information than you ever wanted on that stuff.
Yeah.
I agree. You can't be an expert in everything, but there's so much data available. For me, it's healthcare design. I mean, I joined a group. I attend their conferences, just trying to get out in front of, what's going on new in the healthcare space. What are people implementing, best practices, what's working, what's not working, and really trying to stay in those spaces. Just so that I can kind of keep a pulse. I don't need to be, like previously said, the most technical person in there. I have an AI SME on my IT team that I can be like, hey, I'm hearing about this. Let's come take a look. And we kind of go at it together as to, okay, what are they doing? Does this work for us? Do we think this would be beneficial? And look at it from that perspective. And like Ken said, sometimes things just kind of pile up in the inbox, and we'll get to it when we really need it. But there's so much information available in different forums, in different committees, that you really have a lot of basic information at your fingertips. And if it's something that is really trending in the market, then I know that my IT team, my security guys, they're already looking at it. And so it's real partnership of, where do we want this to go? I mean, obviously very cautious of things that you might be the guinea pig for. Nobody wants to take that on without some financial compensation for being somebody's guinea pig. But there's lots of information available, and so it's picking that area and really kind of diving in and figuring out what your niche needs to be.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that. And Julie, one thing Kent mentioned was, to be in procurement, you need to be a people person, and you need to, be able to do that. If not, maybe it's not the right job for you. But what can or how can procurement professionals like yourself like improve your communication skills, as you're talking to people all day in a lot of cases, right? How do you guys, communicate effectively and hone those skills so that, the CIOs, IT executives, CFOs, they're not only wanting to partner with you, but they're really eager to hear what you're having to say because your communication skills are so vast. And maybe, to add to that, what are maybe some pitfalls within that communication kind of mindset that you want to help other professionals maybe avoid?
I think for me, it's the active listening component. I feel like, you get you can fall into a trap really of like, oh, I've heard this before. Okay, you know, I know what you need, blah, blah, blah. But being in the healthcare space, I can't go into a conversation with a clinical resource and pretend like I know. Even if I might, I can't. It'll be the end of the discussion. So in building that trusting relationship, I have to go in from a listening perspective. And then as you build the relationships, especially up on the executive side, it's really understanding how they approach new projects or procurements or, you know, requests, and being able to tailor your approach and your presentation to what they're going to be looking for. So really knowing your audience, listening a lot, and then just making sure that people understand that you have their best interest at heart. And that is, I think, the hardest part, because that's the softer side of the building the trusted relationship. And then through proven results, knowing that when people know that, especially like for me in healthcare, I am unfortunately available 24/7. And so they can call, and I will answer. And if it truly is an emergency, I will help them. And so having those kind of relationships, I think really helps people to, you know, rely on you and come to you when they have a situation, whether it's an emergency or not, and they just need some additional help. So I think being available and being a good listener, it really helps people to, you know, just know that you're hearing their requirements and not just trying to put a band-aid on what you think might help them, as opposed to what the true issue is. So I've sat down with nursing offices and walk me through your workflow. Show me what you do, knowing that I will never ever do that, but show me what you do so that I can have an understanding of where your pain points are, what's not working for you, how can we fix this? And then as I see products or see solutions or hear of different things, I can also have an offline conversation with them to say, this is only going to get 3/4 of your issue. If you're looking for a full solution, this is not really going to work out for you. Are you okay with that? And having that direct conversation, maybe not in front of the vendor, but, you know, and having that relationship with them, I think is what really kind of gets you to that partnership role, as opposed to, you know, really the buyer, because you don't want to be known as the buyer. You want to be known as that strategic partner.
So I would like to dovetail on what Julie said. So if you're presenting to executives and you've never been in front of them before, find someone you trust that knows what they like and how they like it, and have them mentor you on your presentation. Or even in some cases, like I had a presentation to a whole bunch of executives, and the CFO in the presentation said, I like what you have all the information. I want it structured differently. He's like, call me later today and I can walk you through kind of how to lay this out the way I want to see it. And I'm like, I've never called the vendor personally. I'm like, I texted him later in the day. I'm like, hey, let me know if you have time. He's like, I'm surprised you called me, he said, but thank you. And then I got an A- on my next deck. He's like, I can't give you an A+, because there's always room for improvement. But rely on people that know their style, because every executive has a different style on what they want. Some want summaries, some want details, some want a discussion. So you've got to be prepared and be able to flex your style to coordinate with that. You can't always just be the dry. Don't ever read the slides to an executive ever, please. Just don't even show up if that's your plan. Please. They've already read it. They can read way faster than you can talk.
Well, as we kind of wrap up here, you know, what I've heard a lot today is, you know, you need to be a strategic partner, you need to communicate well, you need to present well, you need to be willing to listen. Kind of sounds like procurement or salespeople. Just throwing it out there, you know what I'm
But we're not full of it. We're the truth.
I was going to say
We're
there's a big
taking the
difference. We
sales part
actually
and squeezing the
Yeah.
truth out of it.
You guys work for a living, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's a little different than that. I think it's also knowing to where to continue to push, like where you know there's more savings, when you need to kind of draw the hard line, and say this is what we're moving forward with, can you meet this number or not? And sticking to that. So there's a lot of the relationship building across your organization, but when it comes to those vendor negotiations, knowing where you're going to draw the line and say, this is what I mean, and stick to it, and understanding kind of where those pushes and pulls are, I think is another important tactic for someone from a procurement perspective.
Even like Julie's saying, sometimes there are certain technologies where the sales team for who's trying to sell you, they just want a discussion with the CIO or whoever's leading the project. So your job in that role, in that situation, then is to make sure you prepare them for that discussion. Say, they want to have a direct discussion. These are the things that we're asking for, and this is where we're stuck. So dovetail these in there if it makes sense. If not, sometimes it's just a relationship discussion and they'll bring them back straight to procurement. But there are times they want to say, well, I did it with the engineering VP. I've finished the deal. Well, whatever, we gave them all the information, but they can take their credit however they want, but they rely heavily on saying, I've got a relationship with the CIO, the engineering VP, whoever of this organization. Even though the procurement teams should always be there to support them.
Awesome. Well, I think this might end at 3. I think I heard it might be like a strict cutoff on us. I don't want, but I just want to say I sincerely appreciate both of you guys' time. We learned a lot. Procurement leaders out there are going to learn a lot from this and help implement that effectively. Sincerely appreciate the time. Lava, we definitely appreciate everything you guys have done for us today, and looking forward to helping you guys any way we can in the future as well.
All right. Sounds good.
All
Thanks,
right.
Billy. Thanks, Julie.
Y'all have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right.